They thought we'd take it, just like that. A room full of arrogant bastards from every corner of the known galaxy, sitting in their polished thrones under the Council Dome, looking down on the lone representative from Earth like he was a disease. I watched it live, like most of the planet did. Streams buzzing, comment sections boiling over as the insult landed with a gut-punch force. They didn't even mask it behind fancy diplomacy. The Zarnak speaker, tall and oily-skinned, with his black tendrils coiled around his neck like some ceremonial noose, had stepped forward and said it clear. Humanity is an unstable, emotionally defective species, barely evolved primates pretending to understand civilization. Their admission to this council is not just premature, it is dangerous. The chamber fell quiet, but nobody objected. Not the sleek Ilari with their hive-mind ethics, not the Rendar delegates with their silicon smugness, not even the Feliari diplomats who used to call us brothers in fire during the Orion Wars. No one said a word in defense. And Earth's delegate, Ambassador Rayner, he just stood there. You could see it in his jaw, the way it clenched under the pressure of humiliation. His lips twitched like they wanted to spit fire, but politics had its leash wrapped tight around his throat. That night, Earth burned with fury. Not the literal kind, not yet, but the kind you feel in your bones when your species gets dragged through dirt in front of the stars. Talk shows exploded, military feeds lit up with unsanctioned chatter. The Prime Authority pushed for restraint. But men like me? We were already thinking payback. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not even a soldier anymore. But I know what rage feels like when it's pure. I know what it's like to be told you're beneath someone who never lifted a weapon, never lost a son in space dust, never built a legacy from nothing but blood and sweat. My name's Cole Danner, 41, former ground operations, Terra-born. I've led kill teams in the Arcadian tunnels and lost men under Ilari radiation storms. I've watched my own brother choke on alien gas because some bureaucrat thought human lungs could adjust. So when the insult hit, it didn't feel like words. It felt like a scar getting ripped open. And I wasn't the only one. Veterans, engineers, fringe colonists, miners who never left the asteroid belts, Earth's underbelly, the kind the Council never saw or wanted to see. We all started talking, sharing, organizing, not in some dramatic rebel way, but quietly, through encrypted nets and buried servers. The kind of communication you don't notice until it's already too late. We weren't out to scream for attention. We were out to remind the stars that humans didn't bow. It started with the ships. Old retrofitted cruisers turned private haulers suddenly vanishing from transponders. Defense drones going missing from remote colonies. Supply chains rerouted through black channels. The Council thought it was logistics failing. They thought Earth was crumbling under shame. In truth, we were building. Out in the shadow systems, beyond the legal reach of the Intergalactic Accord, we began forging the one thing humanity was always best at. War machines. Brutal, ugly, efficient. Nothing fancy like the Ilari plasma sails or Rendar fractal cores. Just steel, fire, and human hatred welded together into vengeance. We didn't tell the Prime Authority. They were too busy trying to calm the Council down, issuing apologies, licking boots. They believed in diplomacy. We believed in consequences. The final push came 6 months after the insult. A minor skirmish. At least, that's what the news called it. A Council scout drone was caught near one of our shadow builds in the Ort Reach. It broadcast a warning, tried to escape. We didn't let it. We tore it down. And the moment that transmission hit Council channels, grainy footage of human-built gunships surrounding and dismantling Council tech with no identification, no warning, the galaxy went still again. Except this time, it wasn't Earth standing alone under judgment. This time, we made them feel the silence. And we weren't done. When the drone fell, We knew it was the point of no return. The Council didn't send drones just to observe. That thing was wired with spectral scanners, atmosphere samplers, bioreaders, enough tech to pick apart our entire operation with a single upload. But it didn't get the chance. We scrapped it in 6 minutes flat. No survivors, no pieces. Just silence, followed by the deep hum of war engines waking up in the dark. I watched the playback from the command deck of Iron Rain, a former mining cruiser we'd stripped, gutted, and rearmed with torpedoes and dual coil cannons. She wasn't pretty, but she could kill. That made her beautiful to us. My second in command, Griggs, stood behind me with his arms crossed. He was a quiet man, bald, half his face scarred from a plasma rupture during the Draken siege. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. "They know now," he muttered. "They've always known," I said, eyes glued to the playback. "They just didn't believe we'd do anything." He gave a small grunt. "They will now." The Council didn't respond at first. No statements, no threats, nothing. That was more terrifying than a declaration of war. When you piss off a system of empires that's been running the galaxy for 2,000 years, and they go quiet, you know they're sharpening knives in the dark. Earth's official government still denied involvement. "Rogue actors," they said. "Unsanctioned operations. We are cooperating with Council investigations." All of it was political theater. The Prime Authority couldn't stop us even if they wanted to. We weren't a faction anymore. We were a movement. And we had momentum. 2 days later, we hit a convoy. Council cargo freighters passing through neutral space, Ilari silk, Rendar crystalline processors, nutrient cores from the Kral moons. We didn't take hostages. We didn't broadcast demands. We disabled engines, took what we needed, burned the rest. No messages, no mercy. Because this wasn't about communication anymore. It was about pain. You can't insult a species that's crawled from mud, survived plagues, built fire, flown to the stars, and expect silence. You can't spit on the graves of our dead, our martyrs, our soldiers, our builders, and expect us to swallow it for the sake of galactic harmony. They thought we wanted peace. We wanted dignity. And if they weren't going to give it, we'd carve it into the stars with their bones. Back on Iron Rain, the crew worked like a single angry organism. 50 of us. No uniforms, just patched armor, worn fatigues, tools clipped to belts, mechanics, ex-Marines, outlaw engineers. Every man had lost something: family, home, pride. That loss had a face, and it wore the Council's smug expression. Our next target was riskier, a diplomatic relay hub orbiting Cavern 9, deep within Council-patrolled territory. It processed millions of interstellar communications daily. Orders, troop movement logs, surveillance data. It was supposed to be untouchable. We disagreed. Griggs and I studied the orbital schematics for hours, our fingers dancing over the hologrid. Rotational blind spots, pulse lag in the sensor beacons, docking windows. "This isn't just a raid," I told him. "We hit this, we send a message. You're not safe." Griggs nodded slowly. "We'll need the Widow's Fist." The Widow's Fist was a stealth ship, a former Ilari cruiser hijacked and reprogrammed by our best tech head, a moody bastard named Karn. The Ilari used cloaking shields that bent light, but they never considered someone might turn their own technology against them. Karn had, and he made it sing. 2 days later, the operation was live. We moved in under shadow protocols. Blackout engines, silent comms, ID suppression layers. No insignia, no trace. We came in like ghosts. The strike was surgical. We disabled the station's external sensors, slipped in through the maintenance shaft, and hacked the relay cores. We didn't destroy it. We repurposed it. Karn rerouted a quarter of their entire data stream directly to a hidden server node near Earth's Mars colony. Every secret, Every strategy, every private insult passed around by council members now had human eyes on it. Then, we left. Not a single death. Not a trace. When the council realized what had happened 3 cycles later, their fury shook the stars. Now they responded. Hard. They deployed the Vanguard, a fleet of 70 elite vessels, half of them battleships, bearing the council's golden insignia like a middle finger dipped in power. Their mission: find the traitors, punish the world that sheltered them, and re-establish the hierarchy. They arrived in orbit around Earth without warning. I wasn't on Earth, but I watched the footage. Cities going dark as EMP rounds crashed through upper atmosphere grids. Civilian satellites shattered like toys. A council ambassador beaming down to Earth's prime authority chamber, voice dripping with threat. Deliver the rebels. Or Earth loses its status as a recognized species. They said that with straight faces. Recognized species. Like we were livestock that needed papers to prove we belonged in the stars. The authority folded. Of course they did. They always folded. But Earth didn't. Before they could finish their ultimatum, every screen on the planet switched. From advertisement boards in neon-soaked mega-cities to the wrist comms of farmhands in the dust zones, everything flickered. And then our message played. Not a face, just a voice. Mine. You insulted us. You dismissed our place in this galaxy. You tried to humiliate Earth in front of your thrones, your councils, your empires. You wanted obedience. You will get vengeance. The feed cut to drone footage of our black flag ships dropping out of hyperspace around the outer rim. 60 in total. All black-hulled, unregistered, bristling with weapons. You will not erase our pride. You will not chain our anger. You will never threaten Earth again without bleeding for it. The Vanguard left Earth orbit 2 hours later. But not out of fear. They had targets now. And so did we. The war wasn't coming. It had already started. I remember the night we hit the Vanguard supply line. We'd tracked one of their support haulers through a half-dead sector near Zentar 12. No escorts, just a fat, slow-moving target carrying ammunition, food, medical kits. It was meant for frontline forces who were prepping to cleanse a colony suspected of harboring radical humans. That's what they called us now. Radicals. We weren't radical. We were betrayed. We cut the hauler open in minutes. No speeches, just fury and fire. The captain begged over the comm link. We're non-combatants, I answered coldly. So were we. Then we lit them up. There were no cheers on board afterward, no high fives or victory songs, just silence. Heavy, grim, because we didn't kill for fun. We killed to remind them. The humans you spat on? We remember. The men you laughed at? We return with fire. The children you dismissed? They're grown now, and they've built weapons from your arrogance. We weren't trying to destroy the galaxy. We were trying to survive in it. And if survival meant going through the bastards who thought they owned it, so be it. Back on Iron Rain, Griggs looked out at the stars and muttered, "They still think we're bluffing." I didn't answer, because in a way I hoped they did, because what we were planning next, it wasn't a bluff, it was hell, and they'd walk straight into it. The council believed they were still in control, that we were just animals reacting out of instinct, lashing out, emotional, irrational. That's what they always said about us. Primitive, volatile, dangerous. They weren't wrong about the last one. We didn't want to be dangerous, but they made us that way. By the time they realized we weren't just pissed, we were organized, it was too late. Every colony, every fringe world with even a sliver of human blood was rising. Not waving flags, not chanting songs, rising with steel, with grit, with long-buried rage turned into strategy. We weren't just reacting anymore, we were planning. And the first move in that plan, the battle for Echelon Station. Echelon wasn't big. It wasn't even important by Council standards, just a refueling point for smaller ships near the edge of Sector 12, orbiting a dead planet with no name. But what made it matter to us was who was there. They'd stationed a fleet command corps at Echelon. 4 Vanguard captains, 2 surveillance AI, one of the Council's strategic directors, a Feliari noble named Asun Diel, who'd been bragging in transmissions about domesticating the Earthborn. We intercepted those words, played them on loop in our barracks. Domesticating the Earthborn. Like we were animals they needed to cage and break. So we made a decision. We'd take Echelon, not just for the data, not just for the supplies, but for the message. A cold, ruthless, undeniable message. You don't tame humanity. You bleed trying. The attack began with silence. We dropped out of slipspace 20 clicks beyond the station's sensor reach. Iron Rain led the charge, followed by Black Ember, Ghost Widow, and Maelstrom. 4 ships, each crewed with men who had nothing left to lose, men who chose vengeance over fear. Griggs was at my side, helmet clipped under his arm. His eyes were dead calm. He never smiled before a fight. Never talked either. He just checked his gear and waited for the order. I keyed the comms. All squads. Phase 1 begins now. We go in quiet. EMP charges only. No fire until I say. If anyone makes noise, I'll throw them out the airlock myself. One by one, our boarding teams launched, magnetic sleds firing from the underbellies of our cruisers, like spears across a void. We hit the hull of Echelon Station in 15 seconds. Silent. Precise. And then we got to work. My boots hit the cold metal of their outer corridor, gloves locking onto the access rail. I looked down the line. 18 men, all quiet, all ready. Griggs signaled. We breached. The explosion was barely a whisper, a pressurized pop as the airlock buckled. Inside, the lights flickered. Alarms triggered. But we were already through, cutting down automated sentries before they could scan us. The first guard we encountered was a Rendar tech officer. Long limbs, crystalline armor, 4 mechanical eyes. He reached for an alert panel. I shot his hand off. He screamed, dropped, and Griggs put a boot through his chest cavity. No hesitation. No mercy. We split into 3 teams. 1 to secure the AI core, 1 to breach the command center, 1 to disable the station's comms so they couldn't call for help. I led the command breach. The halls were tight, lined with polished gold plating and council flags, symbols of superiority, of order, of the civilized galaxy. I hated every inch of it. This place reeked of false authority. We reached the command center in 4 minutes. 8 guards, 2 turrets, 1 shielded gate. I looked at my squad. Fast and ugly, I said. And we went in. The firefight lasted 11 seconds. When the smoke cleared, 6 of my men stood, breathing heavy. The rest were down. 1 missing half his leg, another torn open from neck to ribs. I stepped over bodies and walked into the center of the command room. Asundal stood there, wrapped in ceremonial Feliari robes, shivering with some kind of staff in his hand like it meant anything. Tall, blue-skinned, 6-fingered, eyes full of disgust. "You dare," he started. I shot him in the leg. He dropped with a scream, grasping at the wound. "You think we're beasts," I said, walking up to him. "So now you get to see what happens when you corner one." He spat blood. "You are proving us right." "No," I said. "We're proving you wrong. You thought we'd bark. You thought we'd run. We don't run. We bury." He looked up at me, pain contorting his alien features. "You're animals." I leveled the barrel of my rifle against his forehead. "We're human," I said. Then I pulled the trigger. The blast echoed through the station. By the time our other teams regrouped, we had full control, Echelon Station was ours. We broadcast it live. A message hacked straight into the Council's interstellar feed. We didn't show faces, just the Council flag burning on the floor, Asundal's corpse in the background, and the words etched into the steel above, "You started this. We'll finish it." The reaction was immediate. Panic, rage, and most important, fear. The Council declared us terrorists, outlaws. They announced a galaxy-wide purge of all human-aligned forces not under the Prime Authority's leash. Bounties, blacklists, entire colonies put under surveillance. And in doing so, they made their biggest mistake. They proved our point. Every human who'd doubted us, they saw now. Every neutral who'd stayed quiet, they had to choose. And many did. Fringe colonies raised black banners. Miners reprogrammed Council drones. Old soldiers who'd retired after the Orion Wars dug up their rifles and joined the cause. We weren't a few angry men anymore. We were a rising. And the galaxy? It had no idea how much pain we were willing to deliver for our pride. A week after Echelon, we regrouped in a dead zone nebula. No signals, no charts. Just us and the dark. I sat in the war room, helmet off, face still smeared with soot and dried blood. Griggs stood nearby, looking over the next op. Karn was running his mouth about decrypting Council war codes. He was a pain in the ass, but he was brilliant. But it was the silence that told me what mattered. The men weren't celebrating. They weren't boasting. They were ready. They knew this was just the beginning. Because we'd lit the match. Now we had to feed the fire. We weren't interested in survival anymore. Survival was something we'd done for centuries, scraping by while the rest of the galaxy looked down on us. Always the new kid, the unstable species, the violent mistake. Even when Earth earned its seat on the Council, it was never respect. It was tolerance. Pity. And pity's just another form of control, but now we had momentum. Real momentum. The kind that spread like fire through dry grass. Every system we hit made a noise the Council couldn't silence, because it wasn't just bullets and wreckage, it was belief. A belief that Earth wasn't going to take it anymore. I didn't want to be a symbol. I didn't even want to lead. But symbols don't get to choose themselves. They're built from blood. After Echelon, the Council poured credits into retaliation. They sent a full fleet squadron after us, 20 ships under High Marshal Tal Rix. The bastard was a Zarnak, tall and serpentine, a veteran of the Varnum pacification. Ruthless, cold, and efficient. He thought he could wipe us out before we rallied more forces. He was wrong. What the Council never understood was that humans aren't just loud, we're adaptable. You can train a Rendar to fight, but only in ways it was programmed. You can order a Feliari to lead, but only within their caste. Humans, we improvise. We build weapons out of scraps and strategies from desperation. The plan we laid out for Tal Rix was suicide on paper, but we weren't playing by their paper. We called it Operation Black Net. 4 colonies, scattered across 3 systems. Small, mostly mining hubs or terraforming outposts. Council scouts suspected them of harboring radical elements. Their words for anyone who didn't kneel fast enough. We leaked false intel that I was there. Personally, on the ground, they took the bait. Tal Rix sent his fleet to surround the colonies. It looked like a sweep and burn operation. Standard Council doctrine, cut-off escape, broadcast surrender demands, bomb resistance. Show the rest of the galaxy what happens when you poke the beast. But we knew the script better than they did, because we wrote a new one. While his fleet spread across 3 systems, we launched decoys, drones that emitted human life signals, fake transmissions using voice samples, even falsified atmospheric disturbances that mimicked heat signatures from reactors. Tahal Rix chased phantoms, and while he chased, we struck. His fuel depots, his comms relays, his jump gates. We didn't hit ships, we hit infrastructure. quietly, surgical. And when half his fleet realized they couldn't communicate or resupply, panic started to eat them alive from the inside. Griggs called it death by 1,000 scrapes. I called it balance. By the time we launched the real attack, Talrix's ships were low on energy, blind to interstellar data, and nervous as hell. They'd been trained to dominate a target, not to question their own stability. That's the difference between humans and them. They fight wars, we become them. We hit with 8 ships. 8. They had 13 still active. We still won. Because we didn't fight for control. We fought for something they didn't have in their systems. Rage. Rage makes a man keep fighting after his arm's been blown off. Rage makes you crawl through fire to kill the thing that spit on your name. Talrix's flagship, the Judicator Vex, had a command bridge protected by 3 defense fields and a pair of AI-controlled gunners. I still got in. Don't ask how. It wasn't pretty. When I stepped into that bridge, covered in blood and smoke, he looked at me like I was a walking ghost. "You're mad," he hissed, claws twitching. "Wrong," I said. "I'm human." Then I tossed the grenade. That was the end of Talrix, and the end of the Vanguard's arrogance. The Judicator Vex went dark over Sagan's edge. Wreckage floated for weeks. Some say pieces of it still drift in the gravity well, blinking like the final heartbeat of a species that thought it was better than us. After that, Earth began to turn. Even the Prime Authority couldn't keep pretending we were just radicals. Their approval ratings nosedived. Riots broke out in core cities demanding the government take back control, not from us, but from the Council. When an entire fleet vanishes under mysterious circumstances, and the only message that reaches back is a single image of a human flag burned into the hull of a Council carrier, you listen. You start wondering if maybe, just maybe, those angry men in the shadows were right all along. It wasn't about terrorism. It was about dignity. We kept moving, strike after strike. We didn't want territory. We didn't need planets. We wanted fear. The kind that crawled under the skin of every high-born alien who'd ever sneered at Earth in a council hall. We hit a weapons vault on Adara Prime, a convoy near the Gault Rift. We sabotaged a military satellite network in the Jexi Belt, cutting council comms across 6 systems. It wasn't war by their definition. It was something worse. It was personal. And personal wars don't end when treaties are signed. They end when someone's breath stops. Back on Iron Rain, Griggs came to me during downtime. He never knocked. "We need to talk," he said, voice low. "Make it fast," I replied. He slid a datapad across the table. "Intercept from a Council courier ship. They've issued a termination directive." I scrolled the file. There it was. A bounty, my name, my face, a price, 2 million sovereign credits. I laughed. "They're scared," I said. Griggs didn't smile. "They're getting desperate." I nodded, then leaned back, looking at the ceiling. Desperate people make mistakes. And they're not the only ones. I turned to face him. What's that supposed to mean? Griggs met my gaze. No fear. No hesitation. "You're turning into a symbol. You didn't ask for it. But now they follow you, not the cause. That makes you a target, Danner. For them and for us." I stood slowly. "If I'm a problem, say it." "You're not the problem," he said. "You're the fuse. And if you burn too fast, this whole thing blows without leaving a crater." I nodded. He wasn't wrong. But I also didn't care. Because this wasn't about me. It was about all the men who got laughed at, all the women who got called savages, all the children who were raised to believe they were lesser, because they came from a planet the Council never wanted at their table. I didn't fight for glory. I fought for revenge. And the worst part for the Council? We were just getting started. Word reached us that the Council had summoned a Unity Tribunal. The goal was clear. Force Earth to submit, apologize, hand over rebel leaders, and restore order. They gave us 2 cycles to comply. We responded with 1 image. The tribunal's location, a fortress station called Meridian Spire, was shown on screen. Then the image shifted to a targeting reticle. We didn't say a word. Just sent the image. Let them guess. Let them sweat. Because fear? Fear is the best weapon we've ever invented. The Meridian Spire wasn't a station. It was a monument. Floating just outside the orbit of Genar Prime, it shimmered with platinum alloys and gilded panels, like a lighthouse for civilizations that forgot what humility meant. Built half a century ago to host peace summits, it served as the Council's temple, a place where lesser species were summoned, scolded, and then sent away. We'd all seen the feeds, Earth's delegation humiliated, forced smiles, bows of submission. Back then, we called it diplomacy. Now, we called it the target. When we leaked the image of a targeting reticle over the spire, the Council's first response wasn't military. It was moral outrage. Their media organs went berserk. Human extremists threaten galactic peace. Terror at the gates of order. Even the prime authority on Earth made a statement. We do not condone these actions. We urge restraint. Restraint. That word again. They'd used it when the Alari used our colonies as test sites for weather control weapons. They used it when Rendar security officers tossed a human child out of an airlock by accident. They used it when the Council called us emotional animals in front of every known species. Restraint was their leash. And we were done wearing it. We didn't want peace. Not with people who treated peace like a leash they could yank whenever they felt threatened. We wanted fear. We wanted them to see us on their steps, looking them in the eye, saying, "You don't speak for us anymore. We speak for ourselves. And if your voice tries to silence ours, then we'll cut out your tongue." 3 days out from the Meridian operation, we gathered in the war room aboard Iron Rain. 17 ships under our banner now, every one of them unregistered, bristling with modded weapons, crewed by ghosts and outlaws. No flags, just black hulls and a singular purpose. Griggs stood at the holo table, pulling up schematics of the spire. It rotated slowly in the air. 6 docking arms, 3 power cores, 2 layers of planetary shields. A beast. "It's not a siege," he said. "That's a death sentence." He was right. A full-on assault would leave us gutted, even if we managed to break through. Meridian Spire had defense systems decades ahead of anything we'd faced. We didn't need to destroy it. We needed to shame it. Karn, our resident madman engineer, grinned from his side of the room. "So we hit the core?" "No," I said. "We hit the meeting." Griggs turned to me slowly. "You're serious?" "They're calling a unity tribunal," I said. "Everyone's going to be there. Every smug bastard who ever sneered at Earth. If we strike when they're all inside..." "We send a message they'll never forget," Griggs finished. Karn rubbed his hands together. "We'll need to bypass their shield frequency, and cloak entry, and disable the drone net before we even get close. Can you do it?" I asked. He smiled like a man who's seen God and laughed in his face. "I'll do it with one hand and a hangover." We moved. 3 days of prep. Every system we ever hacked, every sensor trick we ever pulled, every dirty trick humanity ever learned from being pushed around. We brought it all. Phase 1. Ghost Walk. Karn fed false data into the Council's early warning networks. He simulated a pirate invasion on the far side of the sector. 75 fake distress calls. It was enough to draw a third of Meridian's security forces away from the station. Phase 2. Black Insertion. We cloaked 3 ships with a fusion of stolen Ilari phase tech and brute force human shielding. It wasn't stable. One spark of plasma and the whole system would collapse. But it got us close, right under the spire's orbit. Phase 3. The Walk of Fire. That was mine. We boarded with a team of 15. Not an army, just specialists. Men who'd fought in places the Council pretended didn't exist. I handpicked everyone. No rookies, no cowards, just wolves. Our goal wasn't to kill them all. Our goal was to make them look weak. We entered through the service ports at Docking Arm 2, bypassing the maintenance scanners with Karn's override codes. There were patrols, 3 Feliari guards, tall and armored. Griggs and I dropped them before they could even blink. Silencers on, headshots clean. We moved fast. The tribunal was already in session, high above in the council chamber. 500 species watching. Dozens of diplomats in ceremonial robes, sitting in spirals of arrogance. On the outer screens, Earth's representatives were waiting, hands tied behind their backs. The council was planning to make a show of our shame. We turned it into a broadcast of their downfall. We burst through the chamber doors with smoke grenades and flash detonators. The room exploded in chaos. Alien delegates screamed, cowered, stumbled over one another. Their guards tried to respond, but they weren't ready. They were trained for protesters. We were war. I walked straight up to the high speaker, a 12-eyed, silver-scaled beast named Velik Moore, who once said Earth was an infected animal that needs containment. I didn't hit him. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Earth doesn't kneel." Then I pulled a beacon from my belt and triggered the broadcast. Every screen in the galaxy lit up. The feed override was absolute. Ships, colonies, council cities. Everyone saw the council, not in control, but cornered, afraid, humiliated. We didn't fire a shot in that chamber. We didn't need to. We showed them fear, their own. Then we walked out. We left behind a message, not carved in steel, not broadcast in threats, just 4 words sprayed across the council dais in black paint: "Never again the leash." When we made it back to Iron Rain, the stars had changed. No more silence from the outer colonies. No more whispered support. Open rebellion sparked across council territory. Human labor zones refused orders. Entire research stations cut their council feeds. Even some non-human allies started questioning the order. The council declared martial law in over 30 sectors. They weren't stopping the chaos. They were feeding it. And all the while, Earth watched. No longer with shame, but with pride. Back in the war room, Griggs looked over new intel. His face was grim. "They've called in the elders." I raised an eyebrow. "The elders haven't intervened in 400 years, I said. Griggs nodded. "Which tells us exactly how scared they are." The elders were the oldest races in the galaxy. Not fighters, not conquerors, but architects of the council's power. If they were stepping down from their high towers, it meant one thing: they were preparing to rewrite the rules, again. And this time, we were in their way. I looked out the viewport. Stars blinked like scattered embers across a black canvas. For the first time in human history, we weren't trying to join the galaxy. We were trying to change it, and we weren't asking anymore. We were taking. The elders came in silence. No war horns, no battleships, no demands, just ships, longer than cities, blacker than space, shaped like bones cut from planets. They arrived without warning, dropping into orbit around central council systems with no comms, no transponders, no explanation. One by one, the systems stopped broadcasting. First Lyran, then Ophar 6, then the entire Varnum cluster. Their silence said more than any threat. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to correct. The council hadn't called the elders in centuries, not since the Barren Purge, when an uprising of the Carthan species nearly burned down 3 sectors over bio-slavery. The elders didn't take sides. They took control. Whenever things got too wild, too unpredictable, too human, they stepped in and reset the board. This time, we were the fire. But we weren't alone anymore. After Meridian Spire, everything changed. Humanity wasn't an isolated rebellion anymore. We were the spark that ignited a galaxy of buried grudges. Not every species joined us, but enough started whispering that the Council's leash had grown too tight, its rules too cruel, its thrones too heavy with dust. For the first time in living memory, the Council was afraid of change. And we were its face. Griggs stared at the incoming footage like he was reading his own death sentence. Their positioning. Elders just formed a ring around Core Sector 1. They're not waiting, I said. He nodded grimly. They never do. We sat in silence in Iron Rain's war room, surrounded by shifting holograms of fleet deployments and shifting borders. Karn stood by, tapping rapidly at a terminal, piecing together fragmented Council intercepts. They're rerouting Prime Authority assets away from Earth, he muttered, pulling resources like Earth's already been written off. They think we'll surrender if they cut off our lungs, Griggs added. I shook my head. They still don't understand. We've been breathing smoke for centuries. The Elders weren't an army. They didn't use guns or missiles. They used gravity manipulation, singularity tech, pulse wave inversion, tools that tore reality apart at the seams. The last time someone resisted them, the Carthan homeworld ended up as a molten belt of radioactive dust. They didn't warn. They erased. But they made one mistake. They thought we were still trying to survive. We weren't. We were trying to win. And to win, we needed to draw them into a trap of our own. I met with commanders from 6 human fleets, all rogue, all black-flagged, all bloody. We linked through a relay node orbiting a dead planet named Nixos. A rock so empty even the Council hadn't bothered mapping it. Holo projections filled the chamber. Warlords, captains, former authority officers who'd defected after the Spire broadcast. One even wore an old Council badge, burned and melted into a crude skull emblem. This isn't a war anymore, I told them. It's a reckoning. What's the plan? A grizzled colonel asked. We don't outgun the Elders. No, I said, but we outthink them. They watched me, waiting. I tapped a terminal and brought up a 3D construct of the Expanse Rift, a spatial anomaly that tore through the middle of Sector 16. A natural disaster to the Council. To us? A weapon. They use slip tech to phase their ships, bend space around themselves. But the Rift? It's unstable. Anything that jumps inside it gets scrambled. You're planning to lure them in? Someone asked, disbelief heavy in his voice. No, I said. I'm planning to drag them. The plan was brutal, risky, but we didn't have the luxury of caution. We deployed 3 decoy fleets through sectors flanking the Rift, broadcasting artificial distress calls in human frequencies. Council law and Elder mandate dictated that all active insurgent threats must be neutralized within 3 cycles. That was bait. Meanwhile, Iron Rain and 2 heavy cruisers moved into position on the far edge of the Rift, hidden inside a radiation cluster so intense it fried conventional scans. We installed signal jammers, pulse field displacers, everything we had. We didn't want a fair fight. We wanted a kill zone. It started with one Elder ship, an obsidian behemoth shaped like a spiral dagger, gliding toward our decoy fleet like a god among insects. We watched from a distance, hearts thudding. The decoys fired. Not to destroy, just to provoke. The Elder ship responded like it always did, with cold, calculated devastation. It ripped the decoy fleet apart in 20 seconds. Not a single body left. But that wasn't the end. That was just the blood scent. 4 more Elder vessels entered the Rift's edge, scanning, recalibrating. That was our chance. Karn initiated the pulse trap. Artificial gravity wells synced with a graviton pulse emitter buried in the Rift's edge. It pulled space itself just enough to tilt their trajectory off course. 2 ships drifted in, then a 3rd, then the 4th. We didn't even wait. We detonated the anchors. The rift responded with violence. A spatial shockwave erupted through the sector, like a scream echoing through physics. The elder ships began to collapse in on themselves, phase warping mid-jump. They didn't explode. They folded. In silence. Gone. Griggs watched the readouts. 3 confirmed kills, I exhaled. And the 4th? Karn shook his head. Partial destruction. Still drifting. That's enough, I said. They'll feel it. Because the elders had never lost, and we just tore 3 of their gods from the sky. The retaliation came fast. They didn't send more ships. They sent a message, a voice, broadcast on every human channel from fringe worlds to deep core colonies. Not words. A sound, like a heartbeat wrapped in metal and static. Then a warning. Cease resistance, or your species will be ended. Not subjugated. Ended. We played the message on loop in the war room. The crew listened in silence. Then Griggs leaned forward, turned it off, and said, "They think that scares us?" I looked at him. "No," I said. "They just told us they're scared too." Because threats come when fear walks in, and fear had found them. Earth began to rally. Not the Prime Authority. They were collapsing under their own cowardice. But the people. Rebel colonies started sending materials. Engineers volunteered their lives. Civilians formed militias. Farmers forged ammo in old tractor factories. Dock workers converted tugs into intercept ships. There were no more uniforms, no more sides, just one cause, one people, and one war. Back in the medbay, I stood over a boy, 17, half his body wrapped in synth mesh. He'd volunteered as a runner during the Echelon strike, took shrapnel to the lungs, should have died. He looked up at me, barely able to speak. "You think we'll win, sir?" I didn't lie. "We already are," I said. "Every minute we're still breathing, we're winning." He smiled, weak but proud. And in that moment, I knew something. We weren't fighting to survive anymore. We were fighting to belong. Not at their table, but at ours. Built from steel, rage, memory, and the bones of every bastard who ever looked down on Earth. They called it the Eclipse Wave. 12 Elder-class vessels phased into our system like a storm of obsidian knives, dropping into synchronized orbit over Earth, Luna, Mars, and the Titan relay hubs. Not cloaked, not hidden, visible to every camera, every telescope, every child staring up at the sky. It was a message. No more warnings, no more diplomacy. This was execution. The Council had begged them for containment. But the elders saw only one solution to what we'd become. Erasure. The kind they'd used a dozen times in the past when species grew too bold, too unstable, too human. But they'd never dealt with humanity at its worst. And that's what they were about to get. The Prime Authority collapsed within 12 hours of the Eclipse Wave's arrival. Their members surrendered publicly, beamed their compliance into every sector to save their own necks. Cowards. But Earth didn't follow. Cities on fire, power grids rerouted, civilians armed and barricading metro levels, naval bases refusing orders, even law enforcement turned, many of them ex-military, tired of being told they were fighting terrorists when they knew damn well who the real enemy was. And the best part? No central command, no single leader, just millions of furious humans linked by rage and memory, moving like a hive born from pain. The elders couldn't calculate that, couldn't process it. Their machines couldn't measure vengeance. I was on Luna Station when the first strike came. They hit the South Pole reactors with a kinetic rod. No warning, no light. Just an impact that turned a square mile of ice into a crater of boiling dust. 200 civilians, gone in a blink. The feed from the base cut mid-sentence. It wasn't war. It was slaughter. The Council called it a measured response. We called it what it was, proof. Proof they were never afraid of our violence. They were afraid of our voice. So we gave them something to be truly terrified of. On the third day of the wave, we launched Operation WIDOW. It wasn't about ships, wasn't about numbers. It was about a weapon we'd kept buried, one that violated every accord, every ethical line, every council protocol. We called it the Echo Mind, a neurodata virus created during the Mars Rebellion 20 years back. Designed to overload elder-linked synthetic intelligence by mimicking real-time trauma input, memories, screams, deaths, betrayal, pain. Not simulated, recorded. It was banned, locked away in the black files of Earth's old war labs. Griggs had kept a copy. Of course he had. "I don't care how smart they are," he growled. "Nothing survives a human soul tearing its way through your mind." Karn modified the Echo package into a signal burst, synced to their sensory interface networks. We couldn't destroy their ships, but we could invade them. And so we did. We linked into their sensory stream during their second approach wave. The moment they activated long-range scans over Earth, they opened the door. And the ghosts flooded in. Every atrocity, every failure, every father holding a dead child, every soldier screaming in a vacuum, every betrayal, every last breath, every memory we'd buried deep just to keep going, they felt it. All of it. We turned our pain into a weapon. The elder ships reeled, literally. 3 of them broke formation, firing erratically, some spinning off course. One crashed into the edge of Mars's atmosphere, burning on entry like a dying god. It wasn't enough to kill them all, but it showed them something they didn't believe possible. Fear. Real, cold, blood-soaked fear. And once you plant that seed in an empire that's never felt it, you watch the rot begin. The council tried to intervene, tried to broker peace. Now they wanted to talk. Too late. We aired every secret we'd scraped from their servers during the years we'd been hunted. Trade deals that sacrificed colonies for mineral rights, genetic cleansing experiments, species categorized by value, and the worst? Project Shepherd, a covert operation to breed subservient humans on isolated worlds, trained from birth to obey council thought patterns. They called it cultural realignment. We called it genocide. Once we dropped that data across every known broadcast stream, even species who hated us started asking questions. The council scrambled to deny it. But the elders? They said nothing, because they didn't deny it. They just didn't care. And that sealed it. The lines were drawn. Back aboard Iron Rain, we plotted the next move. Karn had pinpointed the Elder Fleet's neural signal relay, some kind of core structure aboard the flagship, Vesper Arc, orbiting Saturn. The Arc wasn't a ship by any standard. It was a floating fortress, older than our solar calendar, powered by dark energy pulses and folded geometry tech we barely understood. "Destroy the relay," Karn said, "and you break their hive link." They lose synchronization. No more perfect strikes. No more shared senses. Griggs raised an eyebrow. "And how the hell do we do that?" Karn grinned. "We send Cole Danner into the Ark." The insertion team was just 6 of us. Me, Griggs, Karn, and 3 Warborn. Veterans who'd survived 3 different system purges. We didn't carry flags, didn't wear insignia, just black armor and a promise carved into our bones. We used an old Terran trick. Pulse blinked a cryo shuttle into range under cover of Saturn's electromagnetic storms. Most ships couldn't navigate the interference. We didn't need them to. We just needed to crash hard enough to hurt something. We breached the Ark's outer shell in a blaze of noise and blood. AI drones swarmed us instantly. Tall, skeletal things that moved like liquid metal and screamed in binary. Griggs took 2 hits to the chest and kept firing. Karn triggered a pulse burst that wiped half the room. We fought through 12 decks of pure hell, no maps, no logic, Just corridors shifting like they were alive, stairwells that looped into themselves, gravity changing every 100 feet. We kept moving, kept killing, kept breathing. And then we reached the relay core. It didn't look like tech. It looked like a heart. A giant, pulsing, translucent organ, wrapped in tendrils and cables, glowing with pulses that made your head throb. "You feel that?" Karn muttered. I nodded. "That's the sound of them thinking." I pulled the DT charge from my belt. Old Earth tech. No data, no hacking, just fire. I looked at Griggs. "You ready?" He grinned through blood. "Let's cut the strings." I planted the charge. 30 seconds. We ran. Half the station collapsed behind us, void winds tearing through ruptured bulkheads. One of the Warborn was sucked into open space. Gone. We made it to the evac pod, hit launch, and watched the Vesper Arc bleed fire across Saturn's rings. Earth cheered. The Council didn't, because they weren't in control anymore. And the Elders, they weren't invincible. We proved that. Not with fleets, not with armies, but with memory, with pain, with the very thing they called our weakness, our emotions, our scars, our wrath. Back on Earth, the boy from the med bay, he was walking again, limping, slow, lungs still synthetic, but alive. He asked me again, the same question. "Are we winning?" I looked out at the sky, at the ships still circling, unsure now, disconnected, twitching like wounded predators. And I said the truth. No. Not yet. But we've got them scared. And for the first time in 1,000 years. That was enough. They thought we'd stop. After the Vesper Arc fell, after the Elder Signal broke and their hive disbanded, after Earth refused to burn and kept breathing through fire, they thought we'd take the win and walk away. They didn't understand the species they tried to erase. You don't humiliate humanity and expect a truce. You don't spit in our face and think we'll just forget. This war wasn't about restoring balance. It was about finishing the reckoning. For every child atomized under a kinetic rod. For every ancestor called a primitive. For every soul they deemed unstable simply for being born human. We weren't here to join the galaxy. We were here to remake it. The Elders had one final fortress. One last stronghold buried beyond mapped space. An ancient, sealed planet at the edge of known coordinates, listed only in forbidden archives. Erithus. Not a homeworld, a control center. It was where the Elder Accord was written, where species classifications were stored, where their oversight, AI, the Thranos core, slumbered in a mountain of alien code. We learned about it from a captured Elder drone still running fragments of chain command protocols. Karn cracked its memory chamber, and there it was. The source of their order, the throne of their silence. And we were going to burn it. The fleet we brought wasn't massive, it was capable. 31 ships, mostly refitted freighters, rogue cruisers, ex-mining rigs converted into carriers, painted black, engine cores glowing like dying stars. No flags, just the Earth symbol carved into metal, a fist closing around a burning star. We reached Erithus on the 12th day. It didn't welcome us. The planet's orbit was wrapped in a synthetic atmosphere that deflected scans, distorted visuals, and blocked all broadcasts. But we didn't need data to know what we were about to do. We came for the heart. And we brought the knife. Landing was suicide. The planetary defenses fired autonomously. Orbital platforms that hadn't opened for a century lit up like the sky was bleeding. We lost 4 ships on approach, but we landed anyway. Griggs and I led the ground strike team. 32 soldiers, ex-council prisoners, volunteers, engineers carrying pulse rifles, colonists armed with homemade Gauss cannons. We breached the outer rim of Erithus's surface structure, towers made of black stone and pulse-conductive glass, humming like they were alive. There was no resistance, just silence, until the doors opened. Then we saw them. The elders, not soldiers, not drones, them, flesh and blood. They stood waiting in the central chamber, cloaked in white, skin like marble, eyes without pupils. They didn't raise weapons, didn't retreat. They just stared at us. One stepped forward. "You've already broken the accord," it said. "Why come here?" I walked up, slow, rifle hanging off my side. My boots echoed in the cold, hollow chamber. I stared at the creature. This thing that decided Earth's worth from behind a desk 1,000 light-years away. "You built a cage for the galaxy," I said, "and called it peace." He blinked slowly. "Without order, there is collapse. Without freedom, there is rot. You would unleash chaos for your pride?" "No," I said, "for our right." He nodded, and then whispered, "Then we are done speaking." It exploded in chaos. The elder behind him triggered a sonic detonation, dropping 3 of our team instantly, blood pouring from ears and eyes. Karn returned fire, shredding the first row of elders into vapor. The chamber lit up in a storm of muzzle flashes, railgun spikes, concussive blasts. We fought like demons, because we knew there was no retreat. This was where it ended. One way or another. Griggs caught a pulse bolt to the leg, went down hard but kept firing. I dragged him behind cover, tossed a frag into a corridor, then climbed over a barricade of shattered marble to reach the Threnos Core access vault. 2 guards, unarmed. They didn't expect us to get this far. I didn't give them time to realize it. They dropped. I breached the core door with a plasma cutter. Karn handed me the data spike. The virus coded from every death the elders had caused, every execution, every sterilization order, every erased history from their archives, the echo of wrath. "You sure?" he asked. I didn't answer. I stabbed the spike into the terminal. It didn't scream. It sang. The Threnos core flickered, hummed, then fractured, a shriek of dying code, like a star breaking in half. Across the galaxy, the Elder control systems went blind. Their ship AI shut down mid-flight. Slave protocols snapped off. Broadcast centers blinked out. For the first time in over 3,000 years, the galaxy breathed without a leash. We limped out of the vault, blood on our boots, fire lighting the corridors behind us. Griggs was hit again, this time in the gut. He grabbed my arm, coughing red. "You get out of here," he muttered. "You're coming with me," I growled. He shook his head, eyes going glassy. "Number, you finish it." Then he handed me the dead man's switch. I knew what it meant. I left him there, alone, like he wanted. Like a soldier, like a man who gave everything just to see the end. Our evac shuttle took off as the upper shell of Erethus cracked, white fire blooming across the surface. Debris scattered into space like sparks from a funeral pyre. And then the signal came through. Not from Earth, from the stars. Species long silent, colonies long forgotten, old rebels, even council worlds now free from elder tech, speaking for the first time without fear, a chorus of new voices, not praising Earth, thanking it. Because we weren't just fighting for ourselves. We fought for all of them. When I returned to Earth, I didn't speak. Not for days. I walked through the ruins of the Prime Authority's towers, now turned into clinics, war museums, and community hubs. The people didn't chant my name. They didn't cheer. They nodded. That's it. Because this wasn't a victory. It was a survival. And from survival, we would build. Not another council, not another throne, but something earned, built from blood, memory, and the will to never be erased again. I visited Griggs' name on the wall, then Karn's, then the boy from the med bay, who died helping evacuate a data vault 2 months after the war ended, lungs finally giving out. They weren't forgotten, because in every human breath they lived on. Not as martyrs, but as builders of the world we've finally made ours. The galaxy doesn't run on fear anymore. It runs on respect, and we taught them that the hard way. Not with perfect speeches or clean uniforms, but with cracked fists, burning ships, and a memory that would not be silenced. My name is Cole Danner. I am not a hero. I'm just a man who was tired of being told what we're worth. And now? Now the stars listen when Earth speaks, because we answered the insult, with wrath, and will never be silent again.